Ambassador stood at the window of the underground bunker, watching her world die. Orange flames rose from the capital city of Haven, and black smoke covered the stars she had loved since childhood. The people had watched those stars for thousands of years, dreaming of the friends they would meet among them. They had never imagined that death would come from those same stars. The Dominion had arrived without warning. Their warships were massive and ugly, built only for destruction. They fell through the clouds like iron monsters, and from their bellies came soldiers who knew nothing of kindness or mercy. They were conquerors. They had destroyed 11 worlds before this one, and they would destroy 11 more after. Pressed her hand against the cold glass. Her skin was pale and soft, almost see-through like all. Her people had evolved on a gentle world where the weather was always mild and dangerous animals were rare. They had never needed claws or fangs or thick skin. They had never needed warriors. They had believed in their innocence that all intelligent beings must value peace as they did. They had been wrong. Captain walked up beside her. He was old for his translucent skin showing the blue veins beneath. The light patterns under his skin flickered with sadness and fear. Among these lights showed emotion. Right now, its lights were dim and slow, the color of grief. "The Eastern District is gone," he said quietly. "They have taken the survivors to processing camps." Processing camps repeated the words like poison in her mouth. "They mean slave camps." "Yes." "How many?" "We do not know. Perhaps 200,000 from that district alone." His voice broke. "The children, they are taking the children." Closed her eyes. She could hear explosions in the distance, feel the ground shake beneath her feet. Somewhere up there, above the smoke and fire, 40 warships waited in orbit. They had enough weapons to burn every city on the planet. And they were using them slowly, deliberately, because they enjoyed the fear of their victims. "Have we received any response to our distress signals?" she asked. "Nothing." Its lights flickered with shame. "The Galactic Coalition has declared neutrality. They say they threaten to expand the war if anyone helps us. The Empire ignored our message. The Federation said they cannot spare ships." "Cannot or will not." "Does it matter?" Turned away from the window. "We are alone. No one is coming to save us." Thought of her sister who lived in the northern province. She thought of her niece, only 4 years old, who had just learned to make her skin lights dance in patterns. Were they alive? Were they hiding in some basement, praying for rescue that would never come? "There must be someone," she said. "Someone in this galaxy who will help." The communications officer, a young named Bora, looked up from her console. Her lights were flickering rapidly with nervousness. "Ambassador, there is one species we have not contacted." I stiffened. "No." "Who asked?" "The humans." Bora's voice dropped to a whisper, as if speaking the name might summon them. The had heard stories about humans. Everyone in the galaxy had. They came from a world called Earth, a planet so dangerous that scientists classified it as a Class 12. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was filled with a corrosive gas called oxygen. The surface was covered with extreme temperatures, violent storms, and predators that could tear flesh from bone. No intelligent species should have been able to evolve on such a world, but humans had, and somehow, against all logic, they had reached the stars. The galaxy feared them, not because humans had attacked anyone, but because of what they represented. If intelligence could survive on a, what kind of monsters must humans be? What kind of violence was written into their very blood? "We know nothing about them," said. "They keep to themselves. They do not join the coalition. They do not trade with other species. For all we know, they could be worse than the. For all we know, they could be better," replied. "You would risk contact with." Looked out the window again. A drop ship was descending toward the refugee center in the South District. She knew what would happen next. More deaths, more slaves, more children torn from their parents. "What risk is left?" she asked. "We are already dying. If the humans ignore us, we lose nothing. If they are monsters, we are no worse than before. But if they are something else," she turned to face, "then maybe, just maybe, we have a chance." Was silent for a long moment. His skin lights pulsed with uncertainty. Finally, he nodded. "Send the signal," he said to Bora. "All frequencies, maximum power, tell them everything. Tell them we are dying. Tell them children are being taken. Tell them we have no one else to ask." Bora's hands trembled as she worked the console. The message was simple and desperate, a cry for help thrown into the darkness of space. It carried across 12 light-years, past dead moons and empty stations, past the borders of coalition space, toward a small yellow star and a dangerous blue world. Watched the transmission indicator blink green. Message sent. She did not pray because did not have gods, but she hoped. She hoped with everything she had. Somewhere out there, in the vast and silent darkness, a species born of violence and survival and impossible odds would hear her plea. The question was simple. Would they answer? The sky kept burning, the kept killing, and the waited for salvation that might never come. But 12 light-years away, aboard a ship called the Indomitable, a communication officer was about to receive a message that would change everything. She sat in her ready room aboard the UNSF Indomitable, surrounded by reports and tactical maps that blurred together after 16 hours of work. At 53 years old, she had commanded warships for 3 decades. She had gray in her black hair and lines around her dark eyes, marks left by too many battles and not enough sleep. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled because She had not left the ship in 4 days. The door chimed. "Come in," she said without looking up. Lieutenant Han entered, her young face pale with something could not immediately read. Fear. Shock. The young communications officer held a data pad like it might explode. "Admiral, we received an emergency transmission. Priority 1. From command." "No, Admiral," hesitated. "From a species called They Are. They are begging for help." Set down her coffee. "Show me." Activated the data pad, and a holographic image appeared above's desk. A female alien with translucent skin and soft features, her face streaked with tears that glowed faintly in the light. Behind her, could see flames and smoke, could hear explosions and screaming. "This is Ambassador of Sanctuary Prime," the alien said, her voice breaking with desperation. "We are under attack. The Dominion is killing our people. They are taking our children. We have called for help from everyone we know, and no one has answered. No one will come. We are told you are dangerous, that your world breeds monsters. But we have no one else to ask. Please, if there is any mercy in your hearts, please help us. We are dying." The message ended. The hologram faded. Silence filled the ready room. Stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, indifferent to the suffering of any species. She had seen those stars from Earth when she was a child, lying on the grass with her grandfather, dreaming of the worlds they might hold. "Get me Commander," she said, "and call all senior officers to the bridge, immediately." 5 minutes later, the bridge of the Indomitable was crowded with officers. Commander stood at attention, his broad shoulders tense with anticipation. Chief Engineer was wiping grease from his hands, called away from repairs. Lieutenant O waited at the weapons console, her sharp eyes watching the Admiral with curiosity. Played the distress message for all of them. When it finished, Commander spoke first. "Admiral, Coalition protocol clearly states that we should not intervene in regional conflicts without formal approval from." "I know what the protocol says, Commander." His voice was calm but heavy with something dangerous. "I also know that children are being taken. I know that an entire species is being exterminated while the galaxy watches." "They have 40 warships in orbit," continued. "We have 7. The mathematics are not in our favor." "They never are." Chief Engineer stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, our ships were not designed for this kind of fight. The Indomitable is tough, yes, but we are talking about engaging a full battle fleet. We would be outnumbered nearly 6-1. Lieutenant, who rarely spoke in meetings, cleared her throat. "Permission to speak freely, Admiral." "Granted." "I joined the Space Force because I wanted to protect people who could not protect themselves. If we do not go, who will?" Silence fell across the bridge. The other officers looked at each other and saw something shift in their faces. Fear was still there, but something else was growing beneath it, something older and deeper. Turned to face her crew. "Let me tell you something about what we are," she said. "We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. The air was poisonous until we adapted. The water was full of parasites. The ground shook and swallowed cities. The weather froze us, burned us, drowned us. And the animals—" She paused. "The animals hunted us for 1,000,000 years before we learned to hunt them back." She walked among her officers, meeting each pair of eyes. "We should have died. 1,000 times we should have died, but we did not. We survived ice ages. We survived supervolcanoes. We survived plagues that killed half our population. We survived because we learned to fight together, to protect each other, to never abandon the weak and the helpless." She stopped in front of Commander. "That is what makes us human, not our strength, not our weapons, our refusal to walk away when someone needs us." Held her gaze for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Her voice would reach every human ship in the sector, every sailor and soldier and engineer who had sworn to serve. "All ships, this is Admiral Park. We have received a distress call from a world called Sanctuary Prime. The people are being exterminated by the Dominion. They asked the galaxy for help, and the galaxy refused. They asked us because they had no one else." She paused, letting her words sink in. "They believe no one will stop them. They believe they can slaughter innocents and steal children and the universe will look away. They are wrong. We are going to show them exactly how wrong they are. All hands battle stations. We jump in 15 minutes. Today, the wolves wake." Across 7 human warships, alarms began to sound. Crews ran to their posts, checked their weapons, prepared their systems. They were outnumbered. They were. They were flying into almost certain death. And not a single one of them hesitated. Because they were human, and humans do not abandon the helpless. The Indomitable turned toward the stars, its engines burning bright, leading a small fleet of wolves toward a battle that would echo through history. He stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Iron Fist, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons and armored with plates thick enough to stop asteroids. Around him, 40 warships of the Dominion held position in orbit above Sanctuary Prime. Below, the planet burned exactly as he had ordered. Cities crumbled. Refugees fled. Soldiers dragged by the thousands into transport ships, destined for the mining colonies where they would work until they died. This was what they did. They conquered. They enslaved. They destroyed anything too weak to stop them. And in 11 conquests across 3 decades, no one had ever been strong enough to stop. "Overlord," his censor officer said suddenly, his voice strange. We are detecting energy signatures at the edge of the system. Waved a massive clawed hand, probably debris, or some coalition observer too cowardly to interfere. No, Overlord, these signatures are. They are moving toward us, very fast. The officer's scales turned pale, a sign of fear among the. They are coming out of fold space. 7 vessels. 7, laughed a deep and ugly sound. Send a squadron to destroy them. Overlord, they are broadcasting identification. The officer's voice dropped to a whisper. They are human ships. The bridge fell silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing. Even who feared nothing in the galaxy felt a cold finger touch his spine. Humans, the species that had crawled out of a planet that should have killed them 1,000,000 times over. No one knew much about them. They kept to themselves, traded rarely, fought never. But the stories about there were enough to make any species nervous. "What are they doing here?" demanded. Before anyone could answer, the communication system crackled to life. Every screen on the bridge flickered, and then a human face appeared. A female, small by standards, with dark eyes that burned with something could not name. Her uniform was simple and gray, marked with symbols he did not recognize. "This is Admiral Park of the United Nations Space Force," she said. Her voice was calm and cold, like ice over deep water. "You are engaged in the killing of civilians and the enslavement of children. You have one chance to withdraw from this system. Take it." Stared at the screen. Then he laughed again, louder this time. 7 ships. You threaten me with 7 ships against 40. Tell her she is outnumbered, and she will die if she does not leave immediately. The communications officer relayed the message. The human admiral's expression did not change, not even slightly. She simply said, "We are aware of the numbers. This is your final warning." "Destroy them," ordered. "All ships weapons free, tear them apart." The fleet moved like a swarm of predators, 40 dreadnoughts turning their guns toward the 7 small human cruisers. Expected the humans to run. Any sane species would run from such odds. The humans did not run. The Indomitable accelerated so fast that sensors could barely track it. It twisted and spun through the formation, moving in ways that should have crushed its crew into paste. The other human ships followed, each one dancing through the chaos with impossible precision. And then the humans opened fire. Had never seen weapons like these. The humans used kinetic projectiles, simple metal slugs, but they fired them at speeds that turned them into weapons of pure destruction. The first volley hit the cruiser Vengeance, and the slugs went through its shields like they were not there. They punched through the armor. They tore through the reactor core. The Vengeance exploded in a ball of white fire. "What is happening?" roared. "Return fire, return fire." The ships fired everything they had. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes and nuclear missiles filled the space around the human fleet. But the humans moved too fast. They dodged and rolled and dove, and when they could not dodge, they simply took the hits. The Indomitable flew straight through a barrage of plasma fire that should have melted its hull. Flames washed over its surface, and it kept coming. Its armor, built to survive a world of earthquakes and hurricanes and volcanic eruptions, held firm. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Lieutenant locked onto another dreadnought. Her fingers moved across the weapon's console with deadly focus. "Missiles away," she said. The missiles struck the enemy ship's engine section. The explosion was massive, and the dreadnought began to spin out of control, crashing into another vessel beside it. "Two for one," Commander said grimly. Admiral gripped her command chair as another hit rocked the ship. "Damage report." "Hull breach on Deck 7, Chief reported from engineering. Automated seals holding. Reactor stable." "Keep firing." On the surface of Sanctuary Prime, Ambassador watched the sky in disbelief. She had come out of the bunker when the explosion started, thinking they were beginning their final assault. Instead, she saw something she would remember until her dying day. The ships were dying. Great metal monsters that had seemed so invincible were now burning, tumbling through the atmosphere like falling stars. And cutting through them, fast and deadly and relentless, were the human warships. "They came," she whispered. Her skin lights pulsed with hope for the first time in days. "They actually came." Captain stood beside her, his own lights flickering with amazement. 7 ships. They brought 7 ships against 40, and they are winning. The battle raged for hours. They outnumbered the humans, but the humans outfought them at every turn. They were faster, more precise, more willing to take damage that would cripple any other species. They fought like creatures who had spent millions of years learning that survival meant fighting even when victory seemed impossible. When the last ship finally fled into fold space, leaving behind a field of burning wreckage, the Indomitable hung in orbit like a wounded wolf. But it was a wolf that had won. Admiral looked down at the planet below, where fires still burned but where millions of were still alive, because her people had answered the call. "This is Admiral Park to all ships," she said. "Well done. Now let us see who we can save." Admiral Park sat in the medical bay of the Indomitable, while Dr. Shin treated the burns on her arm. The ship had taken 72 direct hits during the battle. Sections of the hull were open to space, sealed only by emergency force fields. The air smelled of smoke and blood and something chemical that did not want to identify. "Hold still," said quietly. "The burns are deep. You should have come to me hours ago." "I was busy." "You were being stubborn." The doctor's hands were gentle despite her sharp words. The same stubbornness that made you fly 7 ships against 40, I suppose. Did not argue. Her arm hurt, but it was a distant pain, buried beneath a much heavier weight. What is the casualty report? Paused. The silence was answer enough. Tell me, said. 217 dead, 412 wounded. The doctor's voice remained steady, but her eyes were wet. The Valiant lost main power during the battle. Life support failed. Captain ordered his crew to abandon ship then. She stopped. Then what? He stayed aboard. He aimed the Valiant at the command ship and went to full thrust. Finished wrapping the bandage around his arm. The explosion took out the enemy flagship. It is why Overlord is dead instead of us. Closed her eyes. She remembered as a young officer, fresh from the academy, eager to prove himself. She remembered his wedding 5 years ago, his wife laughing as he stumbled over his vows. She remembered his daughter who had just turned 3. He was a hero, she said. He was your friend. He was both. A chime sounded at the door. Lieutenant Han entered, her face pale with exhaustion. Admiral, the ambassador is requesting permission to come aboard. She wishes to thank you personally. Nodded slowly. Send her to my ready room. I will meet her there. It took her 10 minutes to walk to the ready room. The corridors were filled with damage control teams and wounded sailors, all of them stopping to salute as she passed. She returned each salute, meeting each pair of eyes, remembering that every one of these people had followed her into an impossible battle without hesitation. Ambassador was waiting when arrived. The woman looked different than she had in the distress message. She was thinner now, her translucent skin stretched tight over her bones, her light patterns dim and slow. But she stood straight, and when she saw, her lights flickered with something warm. Admiral Park said, I do not know how to thank you. I do not know if my language has words for what you have done. Gestured for to sit. She took the chair across from her, wincing as the movement pulled at her burned arm. How many of your people survived? Because of you, millions. His voice trembled. They had plans to kill or enslave everyone on our world. When your ships appeared, they stopped the extermination. They focused on fighting you instead. She paused. You saved us by making yourselves the target. That was the idea. Leaned forward. Admiral, I must ask you something. It has been burning in my mind since I first saw your ships emerge from the darkness. He asked. Why? The word came out almost as a cry. You did not know us. You owed us nothing. We are strangers from a distant world, a species your people had never met. And yet you came. You died for us. 200 of your people will never see their homes again because of us. Lights pulsed with grief and confusion. Why would you do this? Was quiet for a long moment. Through the viewport behind her desk, she could see Sanctuary Prime. Fires still burned in some cities. Rescue shuttles flew between the surface and the human ships, carrying wounded to medical bays that were already overflowing. In the distance, the wreckage of dreadnoughts drifted slowly into the planet's gravity well. "There is a story from my world," she said finally. "It is very old, thousands of years old. It tells of a traveler walking along a road. He finds a stranger lying in the dirt, beaten and bleeding, left to die. Other travelers pass by. They see the wounded man, but they keep walking. They have reasons. They have excuses. They are busy. They are afraid. It is not their problem." Listened, her lights flickering with attention. But then another traveler comes. He sees the stranger and he stops. He cleans the wounds. He carries the man to safety. He pays for his care, not because he knows him, not because he will be rewarded, but because he cannot walk by and do nothing. Met's eyes. That is the story we tell our children. That is what we teach them it means to be good. "And is that why you came? Because you could not walk by?" "Yes." Reached across the desk and took's hand. Her touch was cool and soft, her translucent fingers gentle against rough skin. "Among my people we have legends of guardian spirits, beings who come from nowhere to protect the innocent. We thought they were just stories." Her lights pulsed bright with emotion. "We were wrong." Shook her head. "We are not spirits, we are just people. Stubborn, foolish people who cannot ignore someone crying for help." "That," said softly, "is exactly what a guardian spirit would say." They sat together in silence, two strangers from opposite ends of the galaxy, connected now by blood and sacrifice, and a bond that would never be broken. Outside, the stars burned on, and aboard the Indomitable, the living mourned the dead while preparing to save whoever still needed saving. Because that was what humans did. They saved people, even when it cost them everything. On 1,000 worlds, 1 billion screens showed the same images. Human warships diving through plasma fire, dreadnoughts exploding in the darkness, a small fleet of 7 vessels defeating an armada of 40 through pure determination and skill. The story was told and retold, growing larger with each telling, until it became something more than history. It became legend. On Sanctuary Prime, the rebuilding had begun. The fires were out now, the smoke clearing from the sky for the first time in weeks. Survivors crawled out of their hiding places to find something they had not expected. Humans walking among them, not as conquerors, not as masters, but as helpers. Human engineers worked beside builders, teaching them construction techniques developed on a world where earthquakes and hurricanes were constant threats. Human doctors treated the wounded in field hospitals, their hands gentle despite their fearsome reputation. Human soldiers, those terrifying that the galaxy feared, carried children out of collapsed buildings with the tenderness of parents. Captain watched a human medic, a young woman named, treating a child whose legs had been crushed in the bombing. The child was terrified at first, shrinking away from the strange alien with its solid skin and strange eyes, but was patient. She spoke softly. She moved slowly. And within an hour, the child was laughing as made funny faces to distract him from the pain of treatment. "I do not understand them," said to Ambassador. "They are everything the galaxy warned us about, dangerous, violent, born from a world of death. And yet, they are kind," finished. "I know. I have been trying to understand it myself. Perhaps we were wrong about what danger means. Perhaps beings who survive death learn to value life more, not less." Nodded slowly. "Perhaps." Across the galaxy, the reaction was mixed. The Galactic Coalition, which had declared neutrality when they begged for help, now sent formal protests about unauthorized military intervention in sovereign conflicts. They demanded explanations. They demanded apologies. They demanded that humanity submit to coalition oversight. Admiral Park received these demands in her ready room. She read them once, then wrote a single-line response. "We heard a cry for help. We answered." The response was transmitted across all channels. It was translated into 1,000 languages and shared on 1,000,000 worlds. Species who had never met a human, who had only heard frightening stories about read those words and wondered if perhaps the stories were wrong. The Dominion retreated to their border worlds, broken and humiliated. Overlord was dead, killed when Captain drove a burning ship into his flagship. The new leaders sent threats and warnings, promising revenge against humanity for the insult. Admiral responded to these threats as well. Her message was even shorter: try. No revenge came. They had seen what 7 human ships could do. They did not want to learn what 70 could do. On Sanctuary Prime, a memorial was built. It stood in the center of Haven, where the worst of the bombing had occurred. The memorial was simple: a pillar of white stone, surrounded by a garden of flowers that bloomed in every color. On the pillar were carved 217 names, human names, the names of those who had died to save a world they had never seen. Ambassador spoke at the dedication ceremony. Her voice was carried to every corner of her world and to many worlds beyond. "When our world burned, we called for help. The galaxy refused. They calculated the costs and decided we were not worth the price." She paused, her skin lights pulsing with emotion. "But then the humans came, not because it was safe, not because it was easy, not because they would profit. They came because they heard us crying for help and they could not turn away." She looked up at the sky, where the Indomitable still hung in orbit, its hull with battle damage, its engines glowing against the stars. The galaxy has wondered what kind of species evolves on a What kind of monsters must they be to survive such horror? Now we know the answer. They become the kind of species that runs toward danger, not away from it. They become guardians. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral watched the ceremony through a display screen. Commander stood beside her, his face tired but peaceful. "Admiral," he said quietly, "we are receiving distress signals from 3 more systems. Forces are attacking coalition shipping lanes." Nodded, "Plot courses to all 3. We are still damaged. We lost 2 ships. We have wounded crew who need proper medical facilities." Hesitated. "Perhaps we should return to Earth first." "And leave those people to die while we recover," shook her head. "No, we go where we are needed. The coalition has not asked for our help. In fact, they have specifically told us not to intervene." The coalition also let the burn, turned away from the screen. "I do not take orders from cowards. Set course for the nearest distress signal. Maximum speed." The Indomitable began to move, its damaged hull groaning but holding firm. Behind it, the other surviving human ships fell into formation. A small fleet, battered and bloody, flying toward another fight they were not supposed to win. Lieutenant looked up from her console. "Admiral, what do I tell the coalition if they demand to know where we are going?" Smiled. It was a tired smile, worn thin by grief and battle but still genuine. "Tell them we are doing what humans do. We are answering the call." The fleet jumped into fold space, vanishing in a flash of light. They left behind a world that would never forget them, and flew toward a galaxy that was just beginning to understand what humanity really was. Not monsters. Not to be feared. Something far more dangerous to evil, and far more precious to the innocent. I hope. For as long as humans existed, no cry for help would go unanswered. No innocent would be abandoned. No darkness would go unchallenged. The galaxy had learned a truth that would echo through 1,000 years of history. When all hope dies, humanity rises. And humanity will never stop fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves.